Hi, welcome to Costume Commentary. I'm Kate.
And I'm Brit, and today we're going to be discussing Crimson Peak. And before we get started, spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about the end of the movie in order to get it all across.
Yeah, unfortunately with a film like this, you can't talk about it without really giving away things that happen because the costuming is such a big part of
the plot.
Yeah.
Yay! So first off, what did we think? What did you think?
I can't describe how much I loved the costuming in this film.
Agreed. Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yes.
Every detail of it was amazing. And that's kind of how it always is with Guillermo Del Toro's films. Like, every detail in his movies are eye protein, like he says.
Yes. Every single thing means something to the film.
Not only that, but they're just great to look at. They're gorgeous. And as we will discuss later, pretty historically accurate.
Now, how did all the details in the costuming fit into the storyline?
So we know from watching interviews with Kait and also just how Guillermo Del Toro's brain works that he always starts with color as the baseline for everything, and details come later, and this is definitely no exception. I mean, the name of the movie has the word crimson in it, so obviously colors are very important to the storyline.
And yet, surprisingly, crimson is not used a lot in the actual costumes of the movie, but in the overall feel of the set department.
Yes, there is a few times when crimson is brought up, and it's always very poignant, and I think that was a fantastic decision because it means so much more when you do see it.
Yes.
Because they're not all in crimson dresses.
Yeah.
And beyond that, you know, nods to the eras that the clothes came from fit into story development. For example, Lucille is often wearing clothes that are from at least 5 years before the era that the film is set in. So it not only like sets her apart from everyone else, but it also makes it sort of known in a subliminal way that they don't have as much money as they're trying to put off that they do.
Okay, so my favorite gown in the entire film is called the blood drop dress. It is the dress that Lucille wears when they go to the party in the first half of the movie, where she's playing piano in a dress that looks like blood spilling from her.
It's fantastic.
The first time we see her, you just see her in this dress that looks like blood spilling everywhere, and you see the twisting in the back of her gown that looks like her spine is popping out of her, and she looks like something grave and monstrous and something to be feared. So right off the bat, the costuming department made you realize that this character was somebody who was a huge deal in the plot.
And it also gave her a level of antagonism before she's even made known to be the antagonist.
All of her outfits in the film throughout it are super tight and fitted to show how much of a tight character she is. She lives by her specific rules and she is not willing to go outside of them. She's not willing to change anything, even if it might give her a better life, until the very end when she is presented in this flowing gown that just drips from her when everything is out in the open and everything is just revealed and she can't gather all that back up anymore and fit it back in these tight dresses to hide it.
There is a moment after she's in this white flowing gown when it's revealed that her and her brother Thomas are in a relationship, which is a big secret and something that she seems oddly proud of, and so it's a really big moment when that secret's finally out. And she even says, like, it's all out in the open now, and she's walking down the hallway and this white dress is like flowing behind her, and it's so opposite of anything that we've seen her in for the rest of the film. And then Dr. McMichael shows up and there's this costuming moment of her trying to like cover it back up, and she's wearing this green robe thing that she sort of haphazardly tied and is hanging on her, and it was sort of a really symbolic way of saying like she can't bottle it all up again. Exactly what you were saying, like there's no way, it's all out now. It's over. So one of the fantastic decisions made by Kait, who's the costume designer, is that while in Buffalo, New York, Thomas and Lucille look very alien and different from everyone else. And every aspect of the costume design affects that. Like the fact that their costumes seem to be from about 5 years before everyone else's. They have different colors and textures. They also sort of always look like they're at a funeral. And it really appeals to Edith, who is a really young woman who has this like adventurous spirit, but she hasn't found a way to let that out yet. And then you have these two characters come in who are from a different land, and they're very entertaining and interesting to her, and it was sort of inevitable that she ended up falling in love with them. And then the opposite happens when they get to Allerdale Hall.
Yeah, once they get to Allerdale Hall, Edith is the one who looks like she doesn't belong. Meanwhile, Thomas and Lucille look like they belong in that house.
There is a really fantastic scene, it's one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, with Thomas and Lucille standing on a staircase talking about essentially what they're going to do with Edith, and they literally almost blend into the walls. They're both wearing this really dark blue, she's wearing velvet and he has this suit on with a coat, and the camera like pans away from them and you can almost not see them against the walls, and I just thought that was a really fantastic decision because he wanted to make them feel like they were part of the house, and it's a great example of like costume and set designers working together.
Meanwhile, Edith is there and she's in these bright, gorgeous yellow dresses and these white dresses that start to fade as the film goes on. You kind of see her losing everything as what's being done to her happens.
And it also is really interesting, the motif of butterflies that comes in with Edith and the moths that come in with Lucille. I saw in an interview Guillermo Del Toro wanted to explore these two women who are represented each by something that seems similar but are totally opposite, the symbol of the moth and the butterfly. And Edith has these sleeves that tend to get bigger and bigger as the film goes on, almost like she's coming out of her cocoon and blossoming and going from the caterpillar into the butterfly, and they made that shape with these huge puff sleeves, which were not only accurate for the time but also gave this amazing commanding figure to her in a different way from Lucille.
The minor details in this film are so important, as in when Lucille is wearing this blue velvet dress that has ivy and like thorns dripping from it, it's a big deal that you don't really know unless you've dealt with plants. Ivy is the type of plant that grows over everything and it eats what it's around. It chokes it out. It chokes all the life out of the things that it touches.
Which is exactly what Lucille does. And it was a fantastic way to just make a nod. And it's one of my favorite things about the movie is that it's really unnecessary. If that detail wasn't there, that dress would be just as great, the movie would be just as great, the point would be made, but because they worked so hard and put in all these tiny details, even still now, up until filming this episode, there are things that we're looking up and being like, oh, I didn't notice that either, and it adds another layer.
Guillermo Del Toro really cares about his films. It's almost like they're his children, and every detail he puts into his children, it shows, and we really have to thank him for having such wonderful films to have now in our lives.
Yeah, totally.
Alright, cool fun fact. Jessica Chastain wears 7-inch stripper heels throughout the film. They were bought in a little porn shop. They bought these shoes so that way she could feel more imposing throughout the film. So she was always towering over everybody, going along with that monstrous feel they were going for. And Kate Howley talks about how Jessica Chastain would like run around set with them. She was born in 7-inch heels.
Next up, whether or not the film is historically accurate in regards to its costuming. The film is set in 1887, which is technically considered the Victorian era. It is in the last half of it, but it's not, at the end. It's still squarely in the Victorian era.
So one thing that shows Lucille's lack of wealth is the fact that her costumes are all coming from the 1880s, which takes place obviously before the film takes place. And so all of her costume is very tight. Even the skirts are tight almost all the way down. And that was going along with the very 1880s feel of everything being buttoned up and tight. Lucille and Thomas didn't have a lot of money, so all of their clothing was much older than when the film was taking place. Everything was tight and fitted versus in the 1890s and the 1900s where things were starting to get a little bit looser, especially for women.
And just bigger shapes. For example, if you compare Lucille and Edith, their dresses are close enough that the movie doesn't lose consistency, but Lucille's skirts kind of hug her around her hips and then have this tightness and then a little bit of flare around the ankle, almost just enough so she can walk. And then Edith has these dresses that, they're not full hoop skirts, but they flow away from her.
It also goes along with the evolution of women during the time. When Lucille would have bought in these dresses, it was more known for women to just be around the house and kind of be dolls, like not really have anything to do. But Edith was in a time where women could start to go out and do things. It was becoming more common for women to go out and do things, so they needed clothes that they could go out in.
Yeah. Another interesting thing that's one of my favorite random history moments is Victorian mourning. Queen Victoria was known for how long she mourned, and she made mourning very fashionable.
Yes.
And by this time, the traditional Victorian mourning of not being able to see any part of your skin because you're completely covered in black mesh for a certain amount of time, and all the other really, really long-winded rules that went along with it, it was sort of going out of fashion. But Edith has elements of traditional Victorian mourning in a lot of things that she wears. For example, the belt that looks like a pair of clasped hands.
Yes.
Those are her mother's hands. Not only her mother in life, they may have even been made from, like a cast of her mother's hands, a death mold, which was common at the time, but also Edith's mother as a ghost when she comes to her to warn her about Crimson Peak. They remind you again of that warning every time the Sharps are around, even if they don't have to say it, through things like that belt. She also wears jewelry that's made out of her mother's hair at a certain point, which is another common thing they did. So, last of all, our favorite and least favorite looks. Not really story-wise, but just aesthetically or personally, which ones we found the best. Which one was your favorite?
My favorite was the blood drop dress worn by Lucille. It's the first time we see her, and it just makes her look like this monstrous human being who really takes capture of the whole room, and she looks very imposing. And if I'm gonna go to a party, I want that kind of look. What was your favorite?
My favorite is probably Lucille's blue velvet dress that she mostly wears once they get to Allerdale Hall. The dress blends in so well with the house. It has a lot to do with the storyline, like Kait was saying, with the ivy and the thorns, and it really does sort of make her look like she belongs in Allerdale Hall. Like she's the captain going down with the ship, essentially. And it's just really visually striking, especially because it's actually what she's seen in the most, and it's what she's in a lot of the promo pictures, and I just really loved it. My least favorite was probably Edith's ball gown. And there's nothing really wrong with it. I'm not a huge fan of the color on her or the cut. It has sort of that pigeon-breasted silhouette that was coming into fashion at the time, and I've never really been a fan of that. I just don't like it, the way that it makes people's bodies look like pigeon. But it is a really important scene, and it is striking, especially when compared to Thomas and Lucille, but personally it just wasn't my favorite. Which one was your least favorite?
My least favorite was Edith's father during the ball, because the ball was a very important scene. Edith makes a statement later on when something bad happens to her father that he dressed so well because he was scared of the fact that he was getting older. And I feel like his outfit at the ball really contradicts that statement, because it was very ill-fitting. He didn't look like this figure who wanted to be noticed anymore. He just looked like he was gonna fade in. And I felt like it just contradicted the things that she said. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that was such an important part. I wish they had been together during the ball more, because you only ever see him when he's leaving. And I feel like it would have made us care a lot more when things happen later on. Overall, we absolutely loved this film. We loved the costuming in it. Everything was gorgeous and really added to the plot of the movie. And we definitely recommend that you go see it. We have seen it countless times. We will probably go watch it again as soon as we're done with this video.
Probably. So if you like this video, make sure to leave us a like down below, and also leave us a comment if there's any movie, game, TV show that you want to see us review the costumes of as well. Next Wednesday, we're going to be doing a review of the costumes from BioShock Infinite, so make sure to hit the subscribe button if you want to be notified about that as soon as it comes out. Thanks for watching! Corsets are underwear. People just run around wearing corsets just as their shirt. That was just not done. It would be like today if you ran out onto your front lawn wearing only your tidy whities. It's just not something that you do, especially in that time.